Okay, so the Hoel Moshe explains, and he says that Hashem understood that Bnei Yisrael would be going into Eretz Yisrael. And as part of the preparation for Bnei Yisrael going into Eretz Yisrael, what did he need to do? Cut back on the miraculous intervention in their lives. In other words, Bnei Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael were going to have to live like normal people. They would not be able to rely on these overt kind of miracles like man coming down from Shamayim every day, like Mayim coming out of the rock. So what happened? So says the Hoel Moshe, Hashem changed what was happening with Bnei Yisrael, causing them to complain. And this was part of the preparation. What did Hashem change? So interesting, the Hoel Moshe says that Hashem enabled Bnei Yisrael in these, as this 40th year is coming to a close, to begin eating other foods. What were the other foods? Remember, they're now passing through inhabited lands. Right? They're no longer traveling through the desert. They're passing through inhabited lands. So they purchased food from the people, from the lands through which they're traveling. They started eating those foods. So says the Hoel Moshe, it's similar to, and he's not speaking from experience, neither am I, you'll understand this, but he says it's similar to a child as the child transitions from nursing to food. Right? As a child transitions from nursing to food, suddenly he's not or she is not as interested in nursing as before, because the food presents a different kind of taste, a different kind of experience. So yes, the child might still nurse, but the nursing will not provide the satisfaction that the food is now providing. Says the Hoel Moshe, that's what happened to Bnei Yisrael. In other words, Bnei Yisrael were now starting to eat other food, and as they're starting to eat other food, the man no longer provides for them that kind of sustenance that it did when they spent 38 years in the desert with no other food. So says the Hoel Moshe, that's what happened with the man, what happened with the water. So the Hoel Moshe says, after Moshe struck the rock, the water that came out was not as good as the water that came out from Miriam's rock. In the schus of Miriam, it flowed a little bit more slowly, it wasn't as tasty, wasn't as sweet. And again, that was part of the preparation for Bnei Yisrael going into real life, so to speak, where they would have to find a way to get water. So it says the Hoel Moshe, this is why after 38 years, all of a sudden Bnei Yisrael are complaining about the man and the mayim. I mean, they've complained before, but not about the man and the mayim like they are now. Because they have both of those things. They complained when they didn't have it. They complained when they didn't have the mantit. They complained when they didn't have the water. But once they had those things, they didn't complain. But now they're complaining about both of them. So the Hoel Moshe offers an interesting explanation. So we said, as a result of their complaints, Hashem sends these nichashim srafim, right? These fiery serpents. We're not sure exactly what the fiery serpents are. We can understand on a simple level that how do serpents or snakes, what happens when a snake attacks someone? The snake injects poison into the individual. And that poison, as it travels throughout the body causes a sense of elevated temperature within the body. And a person who dies from this, because people died, a lot of people died, they felt like they were, quote, burning up. So this could be a usual sense of, this is the reaction to snake poison. The reaction to snake poison is you feel like you're burning up. And that's why they called these snakes the nichashim srafim, fiery snakes. Not that the snakes were radiating fire or anything like that, but that's what they were called. Interestingly, there are those who want to say that fiery snakes, that srafim, were a kind of snake. In other words, there's different kinds of snakes. There's a kind of snake called a saraf, right, which is a snake that, at least according to some, actually causes a person to feel as if they were thrown into a fire. What? I don't know. I don't know that we have snakes like this, and I don't know. Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shur wants to suggest that there still are snakes like this in the world, at least during his time. He said he's heard of such a thing. He's heard of snakes that if they bite a person, that the person's body turns into ashes. I don't know, I can't ask him a question. I don't know but that's what he heard. In fact, he said that he heard of if a person's riding on a horse and the snake bites the horse, that if the person doesn't get off in time, he is also going to turn into ashes. Okay, I don't know what was extant in those days. And listen, a Kadosh Baruch Hu can create anything. So if a Kadosh Baruch Hu created a snake that bit someone and the person, literally burned, okay, so Hashem could obviously do that as well. So he punished Bnei Israel with these Nechashim. Now we learned why the Nachash. So we learned Lashon Hara, right? We spent some time talking about that. Lashon Hara. What was the second reason we learned? A lack of Hakaras Hatov. A lack of being grateful. That Bnei Yisrael were disparaging what Hashem did to them without being grateful for what Hashem did to them. That lack of gratitude was reflected in the Nachash. Why? Because the Nachash doesn't need God. The Nachash has all the food it wants. What does the Nachash do? Crawls on the ground, eats from the dirt. All the food that the Nachash would want is right there. It doesn't need to pray for anything. There's something advantageous to needing to pray, right? That there is something helpful to an individual in needing to pray, because that causes us to be cognizant of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Imagine if you had everything in life, right? You had as much money as you wanted. You had your health. You had children who behaved and who were accomplished, and all your children, went on and built their own families, and everything you wanted in life. What would you come to shul for? Kiddush. I mean, right? All right, maybe to make sure that you keep it, but if you had it for so many years, maybe you think, this is just, it's the way it is. It's the way it's going to be. So you come to shul for Kiddush, right? But if you don't have these things, so what do you come to shul for? You come to shul to daven. I mean, yeah, you could daven at home, but you come to shul to daven because hopefully, or at least in the ideal world, the shul experience is supposed to enhance our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I still think lots of people come to shul for Kiddush, but that's, that's an element, yes.
No, I was just saying, I think if you have everything, I think it always thanks to Hashem, always to live in
That would be ideal, but the Torah itself tells us that what does Hashem tell Moshe before he dies? What's going to happen to Bnei Yisrael? They're going to go into the land, they're going to be settled, they're going to become fat. What does that mean, they're going to become fat? They're going to have, they're going to be satiated. They're going to have, they're going to become complacent. And what's going to happen? They're going to leave you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So ideally, it would be nice if Hashem gives us our brachos and we say to Hashem, please don't take those brachos away. Please continue to give us those brachos. That would be ideal. But that doesn't seem to be human nature. Maybe that's why there have to be tefillos printed for that, because it doesn't seem to be human nature. Human nature is once we've gotten what we want, so we don't recognize anymore, what's that expression, bite the hand that feeds you, right? So we don't recognize that anymore. So the Nachash, who crawled on the ground, had all the food he wanted, had no relationship with a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He didn't have to be Makir Tov. He didn't have to be grateful to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He didn't need a Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? So Bnei Yisrael, who were not grateful to a Kadosh Baruch Hu for the man, for the Mayim, so Kadosh Baruch Hu sends the Nachash. Another interesting explanation, interesting explanation that I saw, and this also, Rashi brings this, is that the Nachash, everything that the Nachash eats. Now again, I'm not there's got to be a word for this, a zoologist or a, right? So I'm not a zoologist, but according to Rashi, the Nachash, whatever the Nachash eats, no matter what the Nachash eats, tastes the same. It all tastes like dirt. That was the klala, that was the curse that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Nachash. That whatever you eat tastes like dirt, right? So the Nachash is coming to punish Bnei Yisrael because what the man could taste like, you ate one thing and it could taste like anything you want. The Nachash could eat many things and it only tasted like one thing. So Bnei Yisrael, again, didn't appreciate that. So boom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends a Nachash, says, by the way, you know why I'm sending this Nachash? Because look at this Nachash. This Nachash eats lots of things, right? Imagine you go into Kiddush and everything tastes blah. So I'll tell you something interesting. This is some of you maybe have had this experience, or you speak to other people. So after my surgery 4 years ago, it's actually approaching the 5 years now. So after the Baruch Hashem, after the surgery, and there was a time where I didn't eat for many months and just was fed through a tube. So when I started eating again, everything tasted the same. It's a bizarre experience, right? It's like no matter what I ate, and I didn't eat that much, but no matter what I ate, it all tasted the same. It takes time for taste buds, or maybe the memory associated with the taste buds. I don't know. It takes time for all of that to come back. So I literally, like, I have an appetite because everything you ate tasted like Now, Baruch Hashem, now that's no longer the case, right? That's no longer the case, and thank God. But that's the Nachash, right? The Nachash. I wonder what Hashem was trying to tell me, right? The Nachash, right? The Nachash was anything it ate tasted like dirt. So that's why it came to punish Bnei Israel, who didn't appreciate that the one thing that they ate could taste like anything that they wanted it to taste like. Okay, so an interesting idea. In the next, so we'll look at the next pasuk. What did the people do? How did they respond to this? So we're on page 850. 850 pasuk Zayin. Vayavo ha'am el Moshe. The people came to Moshe. Vayomru, and they said, Chatanu, we have transgressed, we have sinned. Ki dibarnu b'Hashem vavach, because we have spoken against Hashem and against you. Hispalel el Hashem, pray to Hashem. Vayaser me'aleinu es hanachash, and remove, that he should remove from us the nachash. Vayispalel Moshe ba'ad ha'am. What happened? The people came and they said a couple of things. So they said, number one, Chatanu. Right? We've sinned. Ki dibarnu b'Hashem vavach. We've spoken against you and Hashem and you. And please daven to Hashem that he should remove the nachash. Interesting. What might we have expected it to say? Nichashim. We might have expected it to say, daven to Hashem that he should remove the nichashim. He should remove the serpents, the snakes in the plural. Not just hanachash, the snake in the singular. And what happened? Vayispalel Moshe, that Moshe prayed ba'ad ha'am, on behalf of the people. Okay, couple of things here. First of all, we learn a very important lesson from this. The lesson is, if you look at Rashi explains it to us. The lesson is very clear. Look in the first column of Rashi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down. The last word on the line in bold, Vayispalel Moshe, on the next line. Vayispalel Moshe, Mikan, says Rashi, Lemi shemivakshim mimenu mechila. From here we learn that if a person asks you for forgiveness, Shelo yehe achzari milimcho, that you should not be cruel and not forgive the person. There might be a tendency that if someone asks for forgiveness, we might say, let me think about it, or no. I've had it with you. I'm not forgiving you. This is the 10th time that you've done it. I'm not forgiving you. Says Rashi, Moshe Rabbeinu, who could be more than Moshe Rabbeinu, who had it with his people, and yet when they came and they asked him to pray for them, he forgave them and he prayed for them. Rabbeinu Bechaye brings it in a little bit more of a, Rashi says it in a short fashion, in an abridged way. The Rabbeinu Bechaye says it in a more expanded way. And he says that we understand from here, and we find Shehispalel Avraham al Avimelech. Right? What happened with Avraham and Avimelech? Do you remember? What did Avimelech do? He took Sarah. Right? Avimelech took Sarah. That's a relatively not nice thing to do to Abraham, right? So Avimelech took Sarah, and what did Abraham do after the incident of Avimelech? After Avimelech gave Sarah back, Vayispalel Avraham al Avimelech. Avimelech hurt him, and yet Avimelech asked him to pray. Avimelech asked for forgiveness and asked him to pray, and Avraham prayed for him. Similarly, Rabbeinu Bechaye quotes a pasuk from Eov that says that Eov as well prayed for other people, ba'ad re'ehu. So the idea here is that even though someone has insulted you, you are supposed to be a person that easily forgives. It's not an easy trait. So, wait, hold on a second. Absolutely, and we'll come to that, right? We're gonna talk about that also. But, so, no. What? Yes. So it said the similar idea. V'chein Eov b'hispalalo ba'ad re'ehu. He prayed for his friends. In other words, his friends came and told Eov, you obviously did something wrong and blah blah blah, and this is why it's happening to you. And they really insulted him, and yet nevertheless Eov forgave them and prayed for him. So this is all an example. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, v'im eino mochel, that if a person doesn't forgive, nikra chote. What is he called? He's called a sinner. Now we focus on this certainly around Rosh Hashanah time, right? When we learn the Rambam Hilchos Tshuva, and the Rambam says that you're supposed to go to a person 3 times. You go once and you ask for forgiveness. The person says no. What do? You go a second time and ask for forgiveness. The person says no. You go a third time and ask for forgiveness. The person says no. What does the Rambam say? Tough. In other words, at that point, if you've gone 3 times and asked for forgiveness, by the way, we assume that when we say you're asking for forgiveness, you're being sincere about it. You're not like, it's not like a husband says to his wife, "I'm sorry." Right? Because we know what that means, right? We understand here. Why are you laughing? We understand here that there's a certain sincerity that is put into place here. When you ask for forgiveness, you're really asking for forgiveness. And if the person is so stubborn that he or she does not want to forgive you, says the Rambam, after 3 times, you no longer have a responsibility to that person. After 3 times, the responsibility is now on that person. That person is the sinner. You are no longer the sinner. That person is the sinner. Now, actually, I've heard of people who go over to someone and say, "I'm going to ask you one more time. If you don't forgive me, you're going to be a sinner." That's not exactly the way to do it, right? But that's, this is the idea here, that you have an obligation, right? You have an obligation to forgive someone. Now, are there certain sins for which a person cannot be forgiven? Yes, there are. That's all separate discussion. But by and large, generally, one is supposed to be forgiving if someone comes and asks for forgiveness. Okay. What about forgiving someone who doesn't ask for forgiveness?
Yeah,
so that might be a mental health benefit. In other words, if you forgive someone who doesn't ask for forgiveness, then it's clearly on that person. And in fact, at night when you go to sleep and you say Kriyat Shema al Hamita, you say the bedtime prayers that include the Shema. That's why it's called Kriyat Shema al Hamita, on the bed. There is a paragraph in there that says I forgive anyone who has harmed me or insulted me today. It's a phenomenal way to close your day, right? To close your day by forgiving anybody who has insulted you or harmed you in some way, to forgive those people before you go to sleep. When you wake up in the morning, you could be angry again, but at least this way you'll sleep. You forgive those people, and that's an important process to go through.
Is this one of the 613 mitzvahs though,
To forgive? I don't think so.
No, so what we're talking about really is character.
Character trait.
Right, so
It's a character
like
trait.
a different kind of, right, it's a different kind of behavior than the ones that are attached to the 613.
I mean, you're right. Listen,
I mean, I
there
just
are
wanna-
we have 613 mitzvot,
Uh-huh.
so this could be under the mitzvah of being a mensch. In other words, there is a mitzvah to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to emulate God. And just like God forgives us, could you imagine what would happen if God didn't forgive us, right? Just like God forgives us, so we are supposed to forgive other people. So you can look at it, you want to put it in a basket, you could put it in that basket. But it's also a lot of mitzvos were given to create within us a certain sense of ethics, a certain sense of morality. The Tzarefes HaBrios, it's called. Okay. So now, so that's what Rashi says. That's what Rabbeinu Bechaye says. That this idea is that Moshe Rabbeinu demonstrated. He's teaching us that when somebody comes and asks for forgiveness, that we are obligated to forgive. Look at what does the pasuk say? So the next part of the pasuk says, Vayomru chatanu, right? We sinned. So Sue mentioned that that's a very important element. That part of tshuva is recognizing the transgression and confessing the transgression, right? Recognizing that you've done something wrong and confessing it. A lot of people, there are people who confess but don't realize that what they've done is wrong. In other words, they have all kinds of rationales. They might clap al chet all day, but they have all kinds of rationales for the things that they're doing. That's not going to bring about the process of tshuva. The process of tshuva is where you recognize that what you did was wrong. That's often the most difficult part of tshuva, because if we thought it was wrong, we might not have done it. And at the time that we did it, obviously we didn't think it was wrong. Right? For whatever reason, maybe we didn't think it was wrong because we were angry at the time. Maybe we didn't think it was wrong because we thought the other person deserved it. Whatever it was, this first step is a crucial step in doing tshuva. And that is to recognize what we've done as wrong. Hakara sachet, to understand the transgression. That's the chatanu, which is here. But the Meforshim point out, it's not the Malbim. It's the Meshech Chachma, something different. It is the, who says it? Okay. So what is the idea here? So the idea is that when a person transgresses, it's the Orach Chaim, right? The Orach Chaim says that when a person transgresses and repents, there's a difference between repenting before you're punished and repenting after you're punished. In other words, if you transgress, let's say Bnei Yisrael had, gone back to their tents, thought about it a little bit, and came back to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, you know what, Moshe? We're sorry, we sinned. We spoke against you, we spoke against God, we lacked gratitude, all of those things. Okay, that's one thing. But when did the people come back and say Chatanu? After a whole bunch of them died as a result of this obviously miraculous punishment that Hashem sent. Okay? That's a different story. Says the Or HaChaim. When that happens, right, it's not enough to just do tshuva. In other words, because you've sinned, okay, you can do tshuva for having sinned. But now Hashem has punished you. So what do you need? You need a zechus, you need some special merit to remove the punishment. Just doing tshuva is not going to be sufficient. And we see that here in our pasuk, says the Or HaChaim. What happens? The people say, Chatanu, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, we are sorry. Why then do the people need to turn to Moshe and say, please daven to Hashem that the snake should be removed? Wouldn't it be enough to say, Chatanu, we're sorry, we spoke against you and we spoke about Hashem, and then what would happen? Okay, they transgressed, they've repented, end of story. No. Because of the fact that they waited until after the punishment for repenting, so now they needed something extra. They needed a special schus, a special merit, in order for the punishment to be taken away. Yes, they did tshuva. That's wonderful, right? It's very good. But now, in order for the snakes to be removed, they needed to have this extra merit, and that was the merit of asking Moshe Rabbeinu to daven for them, which, as we saw, Moshe Rabbeinu was absolutely willing to do. Interestingly, why was Moshe Rabbeinu willing to daven for Bnei Yisrael here, but Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't willing to daven for Bnei Korach? Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't willing to daven for the 250 people who died when they brought the ketores, the incense. Okay, so one simple answer, true, is they never asked for it, right? I mean, imagine what would have happened if the people who rebelled with Korach would have come to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, please daven for us. Would he have done it? Would he not have done it? So there's an interesting interpretation by the Meshech Chachma here. And the Meshech Chachma says, we have certain guidelines about the way in which you need to treat certain people. So, for instance, parents need to be treated in a particular way, right? Teachers need to be treated in a particular way. Leaders of the community need to be treated in a particular way, right? What happens if a person wants to be mochel al kavodo? In other words, I'm a parent, and as a parent, a child is not supposed to sit in my seat at the Shabbos table. So my children know that if they, for whatever reason, want to sit in that seat, even if it's not at the Shabbos table, we're not sitting there, they just want to sit in that seat. So my children ask me for permission to sit in that seat. Am I allowed to give them permission to sit in that seat? So the answer is yes, right? I'm allowed to give them permission to sit in that seat, right? That's, if I am mochel on my kavod, so that's fine, that's acceptable, okay? What about a teacher who wants to be mochel al kavodo? In other words, the teacher comes into the room and everyone stands up, right? Everybody stands up for the teacher, and the teacher says, listen, don't stand up for me, right? Don't stand up for me. It's not, not necessary. Don't stand up for me. So the halacha is, the Gemara says, Talmid Chacham shemachal al kvodo machul. It is, he can give up on that kavod. He can give up on that kavod. But the Gemara also says there's a level at which you can't give up on that kavod. And what is that? Nasi shemachal al kvodo, ein kvodo machul. A leader who wants to be mochel on his kavod, we do not allow him to do that. We don't allow him to do that. Why is that? Okay, so according to the Meshech Chachma, the Talmid Chacham, right? In other words, if somebody disparages the Talmid Chacham, right? Somebody doesn't stand up for the Talmid Chacham. Is that going to impact on what essentially makes this person a Talmid Chacham? No. What makes this person a Talmid Chacham is the wisdom that he has acquired. It doesn't matter whether other people respect that wisdom or don't respect that wisdom. Ideally, they should, But if for some reason they don't, it doesn't take away one iota from his wisdom, from him being a Talmid Chacham, right? Being a Talmid Chacham and acquiring wisdom is not impacted by whether people respect you or not. However, what about being a Nasi? What about being a leader? Right? A leader, in order for a leader to be a leader, he needs to have that respect of other people. So that's why we say, the Gemara says, Nasi shemochel al kavodo, ein kavodo machol. Right? That a leader who wants to relinquish the honor which is due to him, he's not allowed to do that. Because by him doing that, he impinges on the very essence of who he is. The very essence of who he is. I mean, we have all this pomp and circumstance when it comes to leaders of this world in which we live. They have red carpets and they have all these things. Let's say the president of the United States, or maybe that's a bad example. Let's say the president of let's say that the president of Israel. Does he have a special airplane? I don't know. Does he? I'm not sure. All right. Let's say that.
Hard to find one.
Right. All right. Let's say let's say the Queen of England, right? Let's say the Queen of England decides, you know what? I'm going to take the tube with everyone else. I'm going to get on the subway with everyone else, and I'll, would she do that? No. Why not? Correct. She represents royalty, and if she starts acting like a commoner, that impinges on her royalty. In other words, we don't care. De Blasio wants to go on the subway. Let him go on the subway, right? No big deal, right? No big deal, right? No big deal. The Queen of England, right? If the Queen of England wanted to do this, she wouldn't do it. We would object. And I am sure the people of England would object. Because first of all, it's pasnish, right? That famous phrase, pasnish, pasnish means in Farsi, right? No, it's pasnish in Yiddish, which means it's not pas. Not appropriate, right? Not appropriate, okay? So a person who is in a position of leadership, when it comes to being mochel on his kavod or mochel on her kavod, so ein kavodo machol. We don't allow that person to do that because the kavod is part and parcel of what creates the identity of the person. So says the Meshech Chachma, we're dealing now with two different cases here. Okay? With these people of Bnei Yisrael, they spoke against Moshe, but they didn't question Moshe's leadership. In fact, if anything, they equated Moshe with a Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? That's what it says, right? Remember we learned the Rashi. People spoke about Hashem and Moshe. In other words, they spoke against Hashem and Moshe. They equated, Rashi says they equated Moshe with Hashem. So this was not about Moshe's leadership. This was about Moshe's, care for the people, or I don't know. Here, it wasn't a reflection of his leadership. So if it's not a reflection of Moshe's leadership, in other words, they weren't questioning his authority, but they weren't questioning Moshe's authority. And if they're not questioning Moshe's authority, so he can be mochel on his kavod, and he can pray for the people, he can forgive them, he can pray for the people, it's not a problem. Korach, on the other hand, what was going on with Korach? Korach, they were questioning the very source of Moshe Rabbeinu's authority. And when you question a leader's authority, he can't be mochel al kvodo, right? Moshe Rabbeinu can't turn to a Kadosh Baruch Hu and say, leave them alone. No, you can't do that. Because the essence of who Moshe was as a leader of the Jewish people is dependent on that authority. And when that authority gets questioned and the leader doesn't maintain that authority, so then that impinges on the authenticity of his authority. So that's why we can differentiate between here, where Moshe Rabbeinu forgave the people and he prayed for them, and as opposed to Korach, well, we don't read anywhere that Moshe Rabbeinu forgave Korach. We don't read anywhere that Moshe Rabbeinu forgave the 250 people, and we don't read anywhere that Moshe Rabbeinu prayed for them. Now, it is true that they didn't come and ask for it, but maybe Moshe Rabbeinu, in his munificence, should have just prayed for them. Right? But he didn't. And the Meshech Chochmah explains this is the reason why. Because he was a nut, they were questioning his authenticity. Okay.
But they gave him 3 chances. I mean, with Korah, it's an entirely different situation. They were given opportunity after opportunity to pull back, and they never did. Here, the people complained. They didn't pray. Now, my question is, they didn't pray directly either. At which point did the Jewish people begin to pray directly to God? Because
As opposed to asking Moshe to intervene.
As opposed to going to a collective group. Any one of them could have said, I want to ask for forgiveness. And
So-
they didn't do it.
Right, so I think this goes back to the Or HaChaim, all right? In other words, what did the Or HaChaim say? The Or HaChaim said that once the punishment is already in effect, you need some kind, is it too hot in here? You're okay? Right, it's too hot, yes? Okay, right, you need some kind of merit to remove that punishment. Bnei Yisrael didn't have a merit, right? It wasn't, yes, they could pray to Hashem, but they didn't have the merit to ask for the removal of this punishment. That's why they turned to Moshe.
Because he was pure. Was
Well,
he
they turned to
sincere?
Moshe because Moshe wasn't tainted by this, right, stuff. So they turned to Moshe and they said, Moshe, you pray. If you pray, so your zechus will be effective in removing this punishment for us. Now, it's interesting, one could say perhaps this is a paradigm or a prototype for a Rebbe kind of relationship. In other words, what does a chassid do? A chassid goes to the Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, pray for me. Right? Right, pray for me, pray I should be successful in this, pray I should be successful in that. Okay, maybe there's a similar kind of rationale here, but according to the Or HaChaim, Bnei Yisrael didn't necessarily have that schus. What are they going to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're sorry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, you're sorry, but guess what? Here are the snakes. So Bnei Yisrael say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, remove the snakes, please take them away from us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at them and says, why? What merit do you have that I should take these snakes away from you?
It takes them many, many centuries though to get out of like the whole shoftim. They're looking for a leader and slash intermediary for
Bnei
themselves.
Yisrael are always looking for that, right? They're always maybe that's why there's a chief rabbinate in Israel that is
Lord.
whatever. Okay.
The thing about this, could one also say that the reason this is different from Korah and all that is because where it is on the timeline? This is his swan song. He's about to die. He knows it's the end of the journey.
Right.
So, the time for being frustrated the way he was, or saying I can't take it anymore, or enacting punishment without interference. That time is over for him. It's his last hurrah, and he just has the sort of mechila that comes at the end of life.
It's interesting. So, the incident with Korach happened very early in the journey of Bnei Yisrael through the Midbar. We learned that it was right before they were going to go into Eretz Yisrael. It was after they were turned away from Eretz Yisrael that Korach used that to try to. So this is 38 some years later, and Sue is suggesting that Moshe is becoming kinder and gentler. Right? That as Moshe ages, as Moshe's experience, with the Jewish people, and his life is about to end, that Moshe Rabbeinu is willing to forgo and forgive. It could be. I mean, the Meforshim don't. The Meforshim don't suggest that. I think for the Meforshim, I think it's okay for us to think about it, but for the Meforshim to suggest that about Moshe sort of portrays Moshe in a weaker, You say a person when they get older, things don't bother them as much, and
It's not, in my mind, it's not weak, it's more like the paradigm is eternal.
But in the blessings and the curses, he's
I hear.
strong as ever.
Yeah, I don't know.
To the end, he's as
It
strong
could
as
be.
ever.
Right. We know that on that last day of his life, he was a strong. Right. Okay. I mean, it's an interesting thought, an interesting idea. I didn't see anything like that in any of the commentaries. Doesn't mean it's not a valuable takeaway, but there is but there is something to learn. Okay, so what do the people ask Moshe? Vayavo ha'am el Moshe vayomru chatanu ki dibarnu b'Hashem vavach hispalel el Hashem vayasar me'eleno es ha'nachash. All right, remove from us es ha'nachash, the nachash, in the singular. Why doesn't it say v'yaser me'eleno es ha'nichashim? Why doesn't it say remove from us the nichashim? Remove from us the snakes. Why nachash in the singular? It should say nechashim in the plural. So the what? The evil? Okay. So let's start with the easier solutions. An easier solution is to say that hanachash is the general category. Right? There are all kinds of different nichashim. The Nitziv pointed out that the saraf, the fiery snake, was a kind of nachash. And that Hashem didn't just send one kind of nachash against Bnei Yisrael. Hashem sent many different kinds of nichashim against Bnei Yisrael. The people who sinned more grievously were punished through a more powerful, more definitive kind of punishment. Maybe the people who themselves said, depending upon what the people were complaining about, what they were thinking about, Hashem decided how to punish them. So perhaps we could say the Nachash is the general, right? We're talking about the Nachash. Who is the Nachash? It's the general. Remove all of these guys, the whole category. Okay, so that's one way of explaining it. Another way of explaining it maybe is a little bit similar to this idea, where Bnei Yisrael were asking Moshe to remove from them the Nachash. What do they mean by the Nachash? So perhaps we can say the Nachash, Bnei Yisrael, referring to the power, the evil, the power that the Nechashim represented. The power that the Nechashim represented. The Nachash was representative of the desert. Because generally, where does one find Nechashim? One finds snakes in uninhabited areas, right? If you're walking across Middle Neck Road and there's a python slithering down the street, you're going to be a little bit surprised, right? That is out of the ordinary, right? We don't usually see pythons slithering down the street in Great Neck. We might see some snakes in cars and other places, but we don't see pythons slithering down the street. But if you were in the Amazon and there was a python slithering up a tree, right? You might freak out, but your guide would probably say, "Hey, they live here," right? In areas where, right? In areas where where it's desolate and deserted, that's where snakes appear. That is generally referred to as the desert, and the term Nachash refers to, according to this interpretation, the Sar Shel HaMidbar, right? The angel in charge of the Midbar, so to speak. The Sar, right? No, the Sar, Sin Resh, Sar, the force, right? Like we talk about Saro Shel Esav, right? That Esav has a Sar, Saro Shel Edom, right? That there is a Sar, there's a power, like an angel, whatever it is, a power that's associated. So the Sar of the Midbar is symbolized by the Nachash. So it could be when Bnei Yisrael were saying that Moshe Daven, you should remove the Nachash from us. What are they talking about? They're talking about removing the source of this evil, the source of this punishment. That's the Nachash. But there's a great explanation, a really great explanation that comes from the Malbim here. And the Malbim says, when Bnei Yisrael say, Vayasar me'aleinu es hanachash, they're saying, remove from within us the Nachash in ourselves. All right? So says the Malbim says that we know that the beginnings of creation started with 3 characters. I don't mean characters in a disparaging way. I mean characters as in a play, right? Adam, a man, Chava, a woman, and the Nachash, right, the snake. Says the Malbim that we are comprised of those 3 elements. So I'm gonna share with you the Malbim the way that he writes it, even though you might feel that it's not so politically correct today. But let me share with you the way the Malbim writes it. And you can make whatever adjustment you want to make in, to make this more, to make it more appropriate for us. So the Malbim says, what is the Adam part of us today? What is the Adam part of us? The Adam part of us is our neshama. It's that spirituality. It's the pull upwards. That's the Adam part of us. What is the Chava part of us? So the Chava part of us is our physicality, right? That's how the Malbim explains it, right? The Chava part of us is our physicality, right? The Adam part of us is our Gashmias, if you will, right? Adam represents the Ruchnius, Chava represents the Gashmias. These are not terms that the Malbim uses. I'll read what the Malbim says. Shehaneshama ha'elyona shenisna bo v'kochoseha shehem hasechel uvina hu ha'adam. Right? I might argue maybe that's the woman element within us. That's the feminine within us. But the Malbim lived in a different time, and the Malbim said that's the masculine within us. All right. Then the haguf, the physical body, hu ha'isha, right? That represents Chava, the woman, and the Yetzer Hara within us represents the Nachash, right? That was the job of the Nachash. The Nachash was the Yetzer Hara. The Nachash was the Yetzer Hara within us, the temptation within us. Says the Malbim, when Bnei Yisrael turned to Moshe, and Bnei Yisrael said, right, daven to Hashem, vayasar me'aleinu es hanachash. What is Bnei Yisrael asking? Moshe, we need Hashem's help to remove this Yetzer Hara from within us. Right? It's not easy. Your Yetzer Hara is very tough. Right? Yetzer Hara is very tough. To come out on a day like today, right? Single digits outside, to walk out of the house is already like you're all tzaddikim, right? Or tzidkanios, right? To do that, because what does the Yetzer Hara say? Yetzer Hara says, no way am I going to class this morning, right? I'm just gonna stay toasty. I'm not going to class this morning, right? The Yetzer Hara is very tough. So we have to fight against that Yetzer Hara. Sometimes we recognize that we need Hashem's help to fight against the Yetzer Hara. And that's where Bnei Yisrael were, according to the Malbim. Bnei Yisrael were saying, Vayas, right, daven, right? They asked Moshe, he's palel el Hashem, daven to Hashem, that what? Vayaser me'aleinu es hanachash. To remove from within us the nachash that is causing us to transgress. We have a hard time resisting this nachash. So Hashem, ask Hashem to remove this nachash from within us. And this is a very nice, nice interpretation. I might switch around the feminine and masculine parts of this understanding here, because we know that a woman has bina yasera. What does a woman have? She has greater insight and understanding than a man does. Right? We know that. That's clear. One of the reasons why we read in last week's parsha, who was the Torah given to first? The Torah was first given to women, right? Emor el Beis Yaakov, I think it's Emor el Beis Yaakov v'sagei livnei Yisrael, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, the Torah has to be given first to the women and then to the men. Now, why? So there's a meaningful insight that says that Kadosh Baruch Hu recognized the mistake that he made back at the beginning of creation. At the beginning of creation, who did he give the Torah to, the commandment to? He gave it to Moshe. And he gave it to Moshe, and he said, Moshe, okay, you tell your wife, and what happened? and the whole thing fell apart. So everything fell apart, right? He gave the commandment to Moshe. He said, he gave the commandment to Adam. He said, Adam, you're not allowed to eat from this Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. Now, you tell your wife. And we know Adam told her whatever he told her, and the whole thing fell apart. Right? So now HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no more. I'm going to tell the women directly, and I'm going to tell them first. If I tell the women directly, and if I tell them first, what's going to happen? Then they'll make sure it gets done. Right? So that's why the Torah says, one of the reasons why the Torah says that the Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to first give the Torah to the women and then give the Torah to the men. Now, you'll find commentaries that change that perspective a little bit, but that's the perspective that I like, right? Perspective that works for me with this. So I might say that the Bina Yisera here, maybe that's the woman, but...
Hirsch had a different kind of interpretation. He felt that the people complained that these serpents were always in the desert. The only thing that kept them at bay was Hashem's protectiveness.
Uh-huh.
And with their complaining, it was as if he wanted to show them, once he removes his protective shield, all of nature would come and behave in their normal state, and the people would not be able to
resist.
So at this point, they can learn about vulnerability before they go into. So it's a different kind.
Right, but this vulnerability is being given to them as a punishment. It's not a teach. In other words, Hashem doesn't say, they need to learn about vulnerability, so I'm going to have the fiery snakes go in and kill them all, right? But in other words, Hashem did change their diet in order to prepare them for going into the land. And this was, yes, they might learn vulnerability as a result of this, but had they not transgressed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not causing this vulnerability to happen.
But it wouldn't relate to their changing their nature in terms of people. People will, no one's changed the fact that they will gossip or speak to undermine authority or even question God throughout the whole history. But the fact that you could die from this does give an alertness to the fact that there's dangers in speaking against God. That's why the snake came about too.
It's part of the miraculous existence of the desert. Right? If we knew that every time we did something wrong, we would be punished, right? It would be a different kind of world that we live in, right? And not the kind of world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, I think. Whereas HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to have that freedom of choice, right? That freedom of choice is only there if we don't get zapped every time we do something wrong. If we get zapped every time we do something wrong, what happens? We stop doing it. There's no freedom of choice anymore, right? If you have a dog, right, and you put one of these electronic collars on the dog, and every time the dog barks, you zap the dog. What's the dog going to do? The dog is going to stop barking. Is that a rational choice that the dog made? No. Why is the dog not barking? Because the dog doesn't want to get shocked.
This is a dog.
Right? I'm saying, right? The dog doesn't want to get shocked. I'm using that as an example. I mean, imagine if every time we did something wrong, we got shocked, right? So what would happen? We'd stop doing the wrong thing. I think, right? I think, because there are still people who smoke, even though they know for sure that it's killing them.
They don't believe it.
What? Maybe that's not an immediate zap, right? Maybe it needs to be a more immediate zap. Right, I guess if you shock your dog 3 days later, it's not going to help, right? So maybe it needs to be a more immediate zap. Thelma.
So the transgression here was wanting to go back to Egypt, back to Israel.
No, the transgression here was how come we're in this terrible situation? The transgression here, right? Bnei Israel didn't say, let's go back to Egypt. They said, why did you bring us out of Egypt to die here? In other words, we don't want to go back, but this is terrible. This is terrible.
Yeah, the transgression is the lack of faith.
Okay. So Vayispalel Moshe ba'ad ha'am. What happened? Moshe davened on behalf of the people. Let's at least look at the next pasuk. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem says to Moshe, Aseh l'cho saraf, make lecha, for yourself. We have to understand what that means. Aseh lecha, make for yourself a saraf, a fiery snake, whatever that means. V'sim oso al hanes, and put it on a nace, on a pole. How does the word nace mean pole? We'll talk about that. V'haya kol hanashuch v'ra'a oso v'chai. And whoever gets bitten will look at that snake on top of the pole and will live. What's the connection? Right? It's magic, right? You get bitten and you look at the snake and you will live. Obviously not. Obviously there is something more here to this concept of looking at the snake. Traditionally we explain it to mean when you look at the snake, right, you're looking up, the snake is up, you're looking up and you realize as you look up that you should be looking towards Hashem, and when you realize your dependence on Hashem, so you will do tshuva and you'll live. Perhaps we can say a similar kind of idea existed with Bnei Yisrael fighting Amalek. Right? When Bnei Yisrael fought Amalek, what happened? So Moshe's hands were up, so Bnei Yisrael were victorious. When Moshe got tired and his hands went down, so Amalek was winning. Is that magical? No. When Bnei Yisrael saw Moshe with his hands up like this, what did they do? They recognized that Moshe was pointing them towards heaven, towards Hashem, so to speak. So they recognized that their victory would come through their emunah in Hashem. And when Moshe's hands were down, they didn't have that awareness, so to speak. So perhaps maybe the same thing here, right? When they would see the snake and they would look up and they would recognize that, that their welfare depended on Hashem, so they would do tshuva and they would be healed. Is that really what this is talking about? Im Yirtzeh Hashem. We'll check that out next week.